right, guys, welcome to Beard of Darkness Book Reviews. I'm Matt, and I'm so happy. We've had this interview scheduled for quite some time. The Queen of Grimdark is in the house. How are you, Anna Smith Spark?
I'm fine, thank you. Yeah, tired, but fine. Yeah.
So, just for some reference, it's 3 Eastern time in the States, and it's 8 o'clock. What is it, British summertime?
No, we're in normal GMT, Greenwich Mean Time. So yeah, no, our clocks went back the weekend before last. Yeah, no, it's 8 o'clock. It's been dark since about 4:30.
Oh,
But yeah,
isn't
it's
that the
dark,
worst?
freezing cold Friday night, 8 o'clock after the end of a long week. But yes.
So I don't know if I'll ever get used to the time zones. That's one thing that I have to continuously just remind like Australia is really hard. New Zealand, I've talked to EC Greaves, a couple guys over there. That's really hard. There's like 2 or 3 hours within a day that is like an acceptable time to speak with someone. So it's really cool. Culture's so awesome to me. Book Mama 87, Queen of Grimdark in the house, and John Morrow, one of my favorite people.
John is amazing. Yeah,
I love him. Me and him did an interview, and it was just such a fun. He's just like, where's the talent for the rest of us, John? Why do you have it all? Thank you, John, for hopping in. So the series in which I've dipped in, Empires of Dust. Yeah, I'm loving it. Would you tell us a little bit about the series, like maybe an overview, and like the subgenre and whatnot?
Oh goodness, yeah. No, Empires of Dust is definitely grimdark fantasy. It's very military fantasy. It's actually it is kind of high fantasy. It's actually me really playing around with the whole idea of the kind of chosen one and all the kind of tropes of sort of the great leader with the army following him, who kind of, in the Lord of the Rings, obviously, and such, we have kind of Aragorn as the great leader who's going to save the world. This great army, the army's sort of slowly gathering to follow him, similar things like the Wheel of Time. But it's also looking at the kind of the sort of opposite side of that. So it's looking at the kind of the Dark Lord and the people who followed him, and these kind of this notion of these sort of army that's going to take over the world and why they're going to do that, and looking at the kind of great historical world conquering leader figures. So yeah, it's often described as nihilistic. It's also extremely romantic. It's an incredibly romantic book. No one ever believes me when I say that, but I really think it is.
No, it is. There's in more than one way.
Yeah.
You read about the people, the characters, and it's, to me, when I read the characters, lots of them have their nose in the air, and then there's also your humble characters, and there's street fighters kind of thing. I love just the complexity of the world that I see when I'm reading it.
A lot of it's born from just my kind of obsession with fantasy worlds. It came out of, it was created, I didn't do any world building or any plotting, but when I started writing, what I was doing was just exploring this world. So yeah, it's about a fantasy world. It's not a realistic world. I was having a conversation about this, doing a panel about fantasy and science and things, where kind of, so Empires of Dust could not be a kind of, it's not meant to be a real world. It's kind of, the people in it are realistic. I spend a lot of time talking about their psychological makeup and their sort of, there's a lot of stuff that is just about them just being people.
Yeah.
But it's not meant to be a real world. They couldn't kind of, they couldn't live in our world. They couldn't get technology and go into space. There's no explanation for how things work. It's a world that is a legendary world, a mythic world, a kind of in the same way, in fact, of course, I mean, the Vikings couldn't have gone into space. Or
Sure.
you read the kind of the Norse sagas, or you read things like the Cattle Raid of Coolney, the great Irish myths. There's the stories about arguably some of them about real people in real places, but there's no those guys could not. The idea that some of that Cuchullen's great grandson is going to have a computer and kind of live in the modern world, it doesn't work. And it's like that. It's a mythic world.
I love that. Because it plays into the fictitious. When those of us who read fantasy want that, it's this escape to. I mean, you hear that all the time, escapism. I don't know if I classify my experience. I'm sure there's somewhat of an escapism, but I don't really want to read about my modern life in a book. It works for some. But I love epic fantasy. I love grimdark fantasy. I love high fantasy, and there's a reason for that. And I think a lot of us have that in our brain when we're reading these. It's like the more fantastic, the better. And then also thinking about these characters, like you said, could never exist today and function the way that they do, or in the same manner they do in your book. So that's a great point. Daniel Klauser says, memorable first sentence too, and I've got it in front of me. Knives everywhere, coming down like rain.
Yeah,
I love it.
Someone once apparently took the book back to the book, all the way back to the bookshop on the basis of that first sentence, which I'm always quite impressed with. But yeah, the book it's a trilogy: Court of Broken Knives, Tower of Living, Dying, House of Sacrifice, and yes, it opens with this famously kind of extremely uncompromising, extremely complicated, extremely unclear battle scene with a totally anonymous character,
and there's dragons,
and it's just incredibly just kind of and yes, I love. There's if you look on my internet, even my website, that is the word I'm looking for. Yes, if you look on my website, courtofbrokennKnives.net, I've got a reading of that first chapter, and I love that first chapter.
Now, is that the first reading that you have on your Instagram?
I don't know, actually.
Okay.
I've got some readings on my Instagram.
On your Instagram, I showed my wife, because you've got a wonderful narration voice. You do. It totally captivated. I wasn't ready for it. It was before I think I even asked you to, I was like, oh, she's never going to want to be on my channel. But I got the courage, and you're here. So thank you. But the first video I saw was of you reading your book. And I said, wow, she's got a wonderful voice. Check it out, guys, both on the website and her Instagram.
Yeah.
I do have to shout out one of my best buddies ever, DB Rook here, has just the nicest things to say. I told him that I was talking with you today, and he said, now she may not know me as DB Rook, Daryl from Nether Edge in Sheffield. He said that he's reached out to you, and that he was just the most wonderful person, he said that you are. So I wanted you to know that. Bards and Books, thank you, brother, for being here. And Mars, one of my favorite people, another wonderful an indie author. Hi, Matt, and congrats to Anna on her books. I'm really excited to get to A Woman of the Sword. It's right up my alley. I've heard wonderful things. And one more guy. A lot of the time I miss these comments down over here. I feel so bad, but I'm not today. Andrew Watson from the Fool's Tale BookTube channel. Fantasy makes for amazing escapism, even if it is to the horrifying places of grimdark.
It does. It's that kind of, even the kind of battle scenes and things. It's taking you into something so much bigger and stranger and vaster, and that, the old sense of the word romance. So we think of, I started talking about romance in terms of Lovecraft the other week, and people gave me this real oh my god. But I don't mean romance as in chicklet. Romance as in the Arthurian stories are romance. A lot of the Greek myths are romance. It is that the world made re-enchanted. I talk about this quite a lot when I talk about fantasy. That the world given magic back, the world made strange and magical and more bigger and brighter and more colourful, almost the world made back to the way it was when we were children, when everything was new and strange, and things were just bigger and brighter. There's memories that a lot of us have of Christmas or Diwali or Eid when we were little, or a birthday or whatever, when things were just bigger and brighter and stranger, and we didn't know all the stuff that we have now as adults, where you see behind the backstage, that you didn't have any of that. It was all just fantastic. That wonderful magic of the presents are there, and they look huge, and they and everything is just more colourful. And that for me is what fantasy is. It's going back to that world of, and yeah, it's more frightening as well. Dragons are these huge, terrifying things and huge battles, and that fear that, again, a lot of us, I guess, have lost from children, that childhood, that sense of huge danger and not understanding the world. And fantasy for me is that. It's that strange, romantic. So yeah, if no kind of really huge, terrifying, horrifying battle scene, it just stirs the soul in a way that kind of
Yeah. No, I love the way you use romance too, because it's not in the typical sense of, I think you said chicklet or like kissy kissy. You know, it's a way of. There's so many different emotions that could go into a romance. Like nostalgia, I think, was one that you kind of touched on. It sure is a romantic time in your childhood. It's before there was an explanation, and it was just purely magic, right?
Yeah,
I love it. What was your favorite part about writing this series?
Oh goodness. Okay, so some people have probably heard this, but yeah. So my complicated backstory is that I wrote all the time I was a child, and then I stopped writing completely when I reached about 18. I kind of had this complete classic, just total breakdown, and it wasn't until years and years and years later. I mean, I did stuff like, I got a PhD. I didn't do nothing with my life, but I kind of didn't write fiction.
PhD is quite
oh
something.
Yeah, no, I have a PhD in Victorian occultism.
I love that. That is so cool.
Yes. It's ridiculous, but yeah, no. But I didn't do any fiction writing as an adult at all. And then finally, after I've been diagnosed with dyslexia, dyspraxia, and autism, and I had kind of started getting help, and I just started writing. And what I started writing was what became chapter 2 of The Court of Broken Knives. And I just went, and for a year, I was just writing almost every day. And this world just exploded to life in my head, which, I mean, it's weird now. I'm actually going back over the series at the moment. I'm having to do an annotated edition for someone as part of my auction, which is a nightmare. But I'm actually reading, and I can see how kind of crude and less sophisticated my prose in probably certainly the first third at least of The Court of Broken Knives is, because that was literally the first piece of fiction I'd written as an adult.
That was, so this is your first piece of fiction that you had out?
Yes, that is my first piece of fiction, adult fiction, yes. But this world was just exploding out of me, and just, that these characters were just appearing, this world was appearing, and then, yes, and my prose was just, it just began to ramp up. And certainly by the time I got to Tower of Living and Dying, this just astonishing sense of there is this entire world and this huge story. And I understand this whole story. I can see the whole of Marith's life. The 3 books are essentially, they are Marith's life. They are his youth. Court of Broken Knives is his youth, almost his kind of origin story, his prequel. Tower of Living and Dying is him kind of at his height. And then The House of Sacrifice is his decline. It's the kind of big, you could read the first 2 books as the story, and then that's the kind of horrible decline afterwards, or you can read Court of Broken Knives as the prequel, and then the next 2 books are the story of his, what he does and his existence. But yeah, it's kind of, it was all just there in my head. And things like the battle scenes, the whole of the second half of The House of Sacrifice is basically a lot of it is one big battle. There's a great big, there's lots. It's a kind of intense, total, absolutely intense experience. And I don't know where that came from. I have no idea where my battle scenes and things come from. Or similarly, the opening chapter, what's now the opening chapter of Court of Broken Knives. Where those battle scenes come from inside me, I do not know. But when I write them, it is like something else. It's like I'm like outside of myself, and these words are just pouring out, and I am there.
That is amazing.
And it's just, it is the most incredible experience when I'm writing those battle scenes. It's just like nothing else.
I don't know if I've ever felt an answer from an author on my channel that was so real. I can feel that just by the way that you're explaining it.
I mean, yeah, it's really strange. I do just kind of feel like I'm just sort of in there, just writing away. And a lot of the time it's incredibly frustrating. I'll be banging the table because I just, I can't get the words out, and there'll be weeks and weeks where I'm just writing. I'm like, I just can't make this, isn't right. I can't get this right. Everything just feels wrong. And then there're just these moments where it's just pouring out, and I can't explain what I'm writing. I can't explain how I can see it, but I just know, and I can just, and yeah, those battle scenes they are amazing. It's just amazing to experience writing them. It's astonishing, just kind of, yeah.
So kind of an origin story. The way I heard your name the first time was through a BookTube channel, and it was the Brothers Gwyn.
Oh yes, yeah.
Which their dad, dear God, is one of the first epic fantasies I ever read, and all of a sudden they're holding up this book, A Woman of the Sword, right? And just they I believe they said this. They call her the Queen of Grimdark for a reason, and instantly I said, "Oh, here we go." So that's how I found you, was through their BookTube channel. Wonderful guys, by the way.
Yeah, no, they're lovely. Yeah.
So it sounds like the question was, what's your favorite part of writing the series? That journey for you, that emotional journey. That's what I hear.
Yeah, yes, it was, the whole world was a kind of, the world, I was discovering the world, I was discovering the people, I was just, discovering myself. It's kind of, so the beginning of the book is kind of, we have people are moving towards the city, and that at some point there's going to be huge violence in the city. But I was actually quite scared for a long time to write the first really big violent scene. It was a big fight with involving quite a few people. I was really scared to write that for a long time because, I've read a lot of fantasy and a lot of military history. And in fact, my BA was in classics. I studied the Iliad, and my special subject was Alexander the Great. So, I've read a lot of, I've read, the Peloponnesian War, Thucydides' Peloponnesian War, I've read Herodotus' Persian War, I've read all the different extant books about, classical books about Alexander. But still, it was that kind of, I've never been in a fight. In fact, I've got this condition called dyspraxia, which means I'm really physically clumsy. I type with one finger of my left hand, even though I'm right-handed. I will regularly be like I'll be picking up a pen, and I'll be like, which hand do I write with? I can't remember which hand I write with. Or a fork. I'll be sitting there at dinner sometimes, but I can't remember which hand I hold a fork in. So
I think that first is very brave. You've told us some things that are very personal, and I want to just commend you for that.
I'm really open about it, partly because it's just so stupidly obvious, and I'm sitting there like, I can't remember which hand you hold the fork in again, because I can't remember. Maybe I'm going to try it with this hand. No, I'll try the other hand. But so the idea of being in a fight, I mean, you meet a lot of people who write fantasy, and they do HEMA, the Western martial arts, hitting each other with blunt swords, basically, or they do archery, or they do, a lot of people have done sort of Eastern martial arts, which obviously isn't fighting with weapons, but still you're fighting. Right. And obviously I've met people who write fantasy or science fiction in the army. I've met, I have none of that. I've never even done LARP or reenactment. I've never been in a fight. I'm physically incredibly weak. If I tried to punch someone, I think if I tried to punch you, you'd laugh probably, because I'm so puny.
I think if it comes down to it, the Queen of Grimdark's knocking somebody out. Come on.
So the idea of writing about people fighting was just, even though it's something I know quite a lot about technically, the idea of trying to imagine it and trying to make it sound remotely convincing. I was really scared for ages to write that scene, and I definitely nowhere near one of my. But the first big fight in the palace in Zolost is nowhere near one of my. It's not. I look at it now and think, God, this is just not good compared to what I'd be writing now. But the moment I started writing, finally was like, okay, I've got to get down and write this. And I just locked myself in the bedroom, and I started writing it. And it was just, suddenly it was like, my God, I can do this. This is this is like what I was born to write. And
Sure.
just happened. It was kind of, someone's saying that action scenes are really fun for me too. They flow like I'm channeling a god of war. Yeah, you'd really feel like some kind of sense of like, this kind of sense that something else is taking over you. This kind of sense of like,
I have a
wow.
feeling, by the way, that I have to interject. You would probably be a huge fan of Mars G. Everson's. Oh my gosh, it's escaping me now. A Tyrant God. He writes very, very dark. Not even like violent. I mean, there's violence, but it's just like this tone that you both have. You both have a similar
Oh,
way of writing where it's just this. I don't know. It's a dark tone. I love it. So I just thought I'd throw that in there.
I should look out for those. Thank you.
Yeah. So Book Mama says, who inspired you to write Grimdark? Or is this kind of just what comes out of you?
It's just what comes out. Yeah, no, I didn't even know the term when I started writing. I wasn't on social media at all when I started writing. When I began to realize as I was writing The Court of Broken Knives that there was something here that was worth something, and that probably whether I got an agent and a publishing deal or whether I self-published it, someone would like it. So I began to sort of think about, okay, I need to get on social media, I need to start publicizing myself. And I happened to discover the Grimdark Writers and Readers Facebook group, and a thing that was then running called the Grim Tidings podcast and things. And I was like, okay, this is clearly me. And then I discovered all the people who like the same books as me in the kind of community. I mean, obviously I'd been reading sort of stuff like Steve Erickson and R. Scott Baker and things before that, but I hadn't read Mark Lawrence and people, but I hadn't really been aware of the kind of community. I hadn't been involved in the book community at all, the fantasy community. And It was like, wow, this is my home. This is clearly where I belong. Yes.
I so relate with that.
Yes.
It's like, and thank you, Mars, Thralls of a Tyrant God. What a name, right?
Yeah, that's when you start joining Grimdark Writers and Readers, and someone says like, yeah, I wrote a book called Thralls of a Tyrant God, and you're like, yes.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those titles
Yes.
like, oh, that's glorious.
Yes. Yes.
So I totally agree. I started reading the way that I do now when I was 29. I'm 33 now. So I haven't been doing it very long, but like you said, there's so many names out there that I wasn't 100% familiar with the people I am now, just because I wasn't in that community. And it sounds like you've had a very similar experience. It's a inviting community. It's not a competitive community. It's a very, I'm lifting you up as well. It's very cool. I think it's refreshing.
Yeah, I mean, I always say how funny it is about the Grimdark community that everyone is the nicest group of people. It's like, it's just you could not imagine a nicer, friendlier, more welcoming, and it's that people have this really sort of depressing, negative sense of people who don't know anything about Grimdark have this really depressing, like, oh, they're all kind of horrible, misogynistic men or something. Like, no, it is the most welcoming, diverse, friendly, inclusive community.
In fact, I think it's quite the opposite. If you get a chance to express yourself, and we all have a dark side, we all have thoughts that are dark, and if you have a way of expressing yourself, such as writing or any other way, art, whatever your thing is, if you're able to get that out, that's a therapy. So quite the opposite. I feel like people are usually really, really happy who write grimdark or dark fantasy because they get their therapy through what they write.
Yeah, I think we're admitting stuff as well. It's that kind of, I mean, it's I think a lot of people would be like, oh, I'm not going to possibly admit that I'm a fan of a book called Thralls of a Tyrant God. You really are. You're just not admitting it. You're just, if you go really down all the levels, kind of like we're all only here for the Dark Lord with the Demon Sword. Come on, you really go down into it, that kind of, being the evil supreme overlord of the world. That everybody has that fantasy. It's just we are a bit more open about that and also about what it means. It's the people who the really buttoned up people are like, oh no, violence for me is only oh no.
Yeah,
it's that kind of classic thing, the kind of superhero, really simplistic good versus evil, and you always get the super good, clean cut superhero who then kind of says, oh, violence is terrible, violence should only ever be used as a last resort, I abhor violence, I only want justice and the world to be at peace, and then immediately kicks the crap out of an entire room full of minions. And we are honest about that. The Grimdark writers are absolutely honest about the complexity of that and the impulse we all have to kick crap out of a whole room full of people.
Yeah.
And
We've all been to the DMV.
Yeah. And we talk about that and the moral implications of that. So yeah, I think we are actually more sorted, functional people that kind of.
I totally agree. I wanted to say some thank yous. Colin's Corner. Thank you, Colin, for hanging out, brother. Kayla from Kay's Hidden Shelf, and Tori Tekken from Tori Talks. Thank you for popping in. Actually, I have a little chat with Tori tomorrow. It's gonna be fun. So thank you guys for popping in. So we may have covered it a little bit, but what inspired you to write in general? Just in general, you said you were writing from a very young age and then you stopped. Could you kind of go in a little bit further about what you were going through that was like, I have to do this now?
Yeah, it was so it was weird. So yeah, I mean, my dad's a poet, and most of his friends are writers or artists, or were doing creative things. So I grew up. I had an incredibly privileged childhood, which is probably where my writing and my prose style comes from. The fact, my books are really quite literary as well. They are literary, complicated prose. They're not simple prose. So I grew up surrounded by people writing, creating beautiful and strange things. And, I had amazing experiences when I was a child. I was taken to see performances of medieval mystery plays. I was taken to, I had a friend who was a storyteller who tell us amazing ghost stories based on M.R. James ghost stories. And his big thing was Chaucer. I've walked through a wood with him singing bits of Chaucer to us. And then I've heard people sing bits of Beowulf in the original. And, I had all these books around me. My house was surrounded full of Celtic myth, Greek myth. And then we go on holiday every year to different bits of Britain. I never went abroad when I was a child. We go to different bits of Britain, all of which the bits I've been to are described in my books. There's huge amounts of stuff describing the British bits of the British landscape. We go to Cornwall, or we go to Devon, or we go to Suffolk. And my dad would tell me all about the history and the mythology, the folklore, the kind of the matter of Britain stuff, and then the local folklore. So I'd have all this real sense of literature, and my dad loves fantasy. He's got the wonderful hardback first edition of the Lord of the Rings that he was given as school prizes for doing well at secondary school. So yeah, I grew up with this stuff, and it always seemed like a natural thing. When I was a child, I wrote fantasy all the time. Wrote all these fantasy stories, and then they were all kind of basically wrote fan fiction around sort of Celtic mythology a lot. I wrote my own Celtic myths and things.
Yes.
Yeah, and Greek myths. And then I just stopped. As I said, I had this complete kind of breakdown. I mean, apart from anything else, I was a goth who wanted to write. I was a goth who wanted to write her own versions of Celtic myth, living in a small town. It's kind of I was a bit quite lonely and quite didn't have any friends at that point. I was also turned out I was autistic. I was the weird, spooky child at school. And
gosh.
and kind of this is not. I was in a fairly conservative small town, and then I just stopped writing. But I always knew I wanted to write. It was actually really difficult, and particularly knowing all these people who were writers and things. Then some friends, really good family friends, run a literature festival, so we'd go to this literature festival every summer.
Intimidating.
It wasn't so much intimidating as heartbreaking, because it was like, there were all these people here, and there'd be all these kind of, so I'd be helping out in my teens and my 20s, and there'd be all these women, and they were older than me, but they'd be those kind of, there's up and coming 30-something young women who'd written their first book, and they all be at the literature festival. And I'd be looking at them like, what have they got? What is this amazing thing that means they've been able to write a book? Not even like kind of how have they managed to get, a massive publishing deal, and, their book's done well enough, they're at this literature festival. Just that sense of, how have they managed to write a book without, like, the sky opening and God appearing to laugh at them or something? And I mean, that sounds so ridiculous. Now, actually,
no, it doesn't.
I said once to the author Jen Williams, Talon's sister, and the Coppercat trilogy. So yeah, I said to Jen Williams, who's the nicest, sweetest, dorkiest person, I really felt, and particularly because fantasy was the thing I wanted to write, this sort of sense that if I ever sat down to write, the sky would open and like Jen Williams would appear, like the size of a kind of titan, so pointing at me like, who do you think you are?
That's great.
Jen gave me this look and was kind of like, I can assure you, Anna, that's never going to happen. It really felt like that, it really.
I'm sure she was flattered.
She was kind of flattened, but I think slightly disturbed at the idea of herself. Kind of.
If you're not disturbing somebody, you're not doing something right, though. Right? We all are so individual that we have to disturb somebody.
But it really was like that. I'm very well read in the Victorian classics because it kind of felt all right. I mean, like no one else is ever going to write anything like War and Peace, so it kind of felt all right to read stuff like that because it's like, okay, I can't really feel inadequate because I'm not Tolstoy. But that feeling of like total inadequacy of like, I just cannot, I can't read a Robin Hood book because I just feel totally inadequate that she did this thing and she's written all these books and I mustn't. And then one day, I think it was having my autism diagnosis. It was after I had my autism diagnosis. And it was finally this sense of, okay, so, all that time when I told people out there, I thought there was something wrong with me. And they spent time saying, oh, why are you so insecure? You think there's something wrong with you? Like, you know what? There's something wrong with me. Right?
No, I get it.
Yeah. And it just suddenly, I think it was like a release. And maybe it was also this sort of, I was sitting in a cafe and I just had some time. And I happened to have a pen and paper with me. No, I had my computer with me. I don't know why I had my laptop with me. And I don't even know. I've no idea why I had my laptop with me. And the Game of Thrones soundtrack came on. For some reason, the cafe I was in was playing just the Game of Thrones soundtrack as a piece of music in the cafe. And I mean, it is a very stirring piece of music. It is quite difficult to listen. Yeah, not to listen to that opening music without feeling like
amped up, ready to battle. 100%.
And I just started writing. And I mean, yeah, it was just. And it just realizing it was like kind of a lifetime of pain and frustration. I just writing and all the kind of, and it was a compulsion. It was this year where I was just neglected everything. I just completely I was upstairs locked in my bedroom writing all the time. I was writing at work, and my work colleagues were actually incredibly understanding. Kind of, I was writing on the train into work. I was writing on the train on the way back from work. I was writing at work. I was driving people crazy at work because I really didn't want to talk about anything other than my writing. And I mean, it was the most intense year of my life. It was absolutely exhausting looking back.
That sounds exactly like something it would be. I mean, you've got this build up to something you want to do, and this emotional aspect to it. This personal aspect where you're overcoming a difficulty, something that you knew was there, but you weren't sure what. And then all of a sudden things start to connect and you have this just emotional tie into your books. Wow, that's a wonderful story. I love it.
Well, because then I got so dark so the Court of Broken Knives is quite dark. Mm-hmm. And then I got more and more into the story, and it wasn't intended. It wasn't like I was like, oh, how dark can I make this story? But it is an intensely dark, intensely violent story. It is pretty nihilistic. And I think actually by the time I finished The House of Sacrifice, I had kind of broken myself. I'd gone from not writing at all to this. So I then obviously, I wrote a book, the first book in the year. I got an agent overnight, literally overnight. No, I think it was 2 nights. I got an agent. Yeah. Incredibly quickly. Then there was a bit of a pause while waiting to get a book deal. But, I was in this kind of I was just writing. And then obviously, then I had to write a book a year and edit and everything. So I was in this intense. And I think I did go really far into myself. When I was writing The House of Sacrifice, I pulled out stuff in me that is it's a bit of a blur writing the kind of the second half of it, which is just really intense.
Oh, sure.
And yeah. And it's kind of, I think I did actually kind of break myself a bit mentally and physically because I was then incredibly ill for a while. So just one of the reasons it's then been a long pause. And then I suddenly had 2 books out at once because I then I look back at some interviews I did around the time I'd finished The House of Sacrifice, and I look absolutely awful.
just emotionally drained,
I
right?
was totally, yeah, I'm just mentally drained. Writing is a really tiring experience for me. It's because every word has to be right, and if it's not right, I'm tearing my hair. I'm shouting at myself.
Uh, I like what you've touched on, the difficulties you've had, and then you hear lots of people coming up with lots of excuses as to why. And now, don't get me wrong, I'm starting to write. I still have no idea what you go through to write as a book. Lots of people have these roadblocks that come up, but
Yeah.
I hope they see this interview and just really look at all the things that you got through because you wanted to write. And real quick, I wanted to have this answered. Tori talks. Tori Teckham wants to know which one of your books, Anna, would you recommend we start with?
Okay, so I mean, so yeah, the trilogy is The Court of Broken Knives, The Tower of Living and Dying, The House of Sacrifice, and that kind of that's those are kind of, and then A Woman of the Sword, which is
Such a cool cover.
this. It's a really gorgeous. So that is a standalone. You can read it completely on its own. But I think it probably works better if you read it afterwards because it was written as a response. As I was actually just saying very neatly. Yeah, I kind of really broke myself writing The House of Sacrifice mentally and physically. I mean, okay, so minor spoiler: there's a small child who is killed in The House of Sacrifice. That's my son. Everything that child says is things that my son genuinely said, and his relationship with his mother is most of the things his mother says to him are things I said. And I really some of the stuff that happens to Thalia is stuff I've been through. It really broke me. I think I went so far into myself writing some of that stuff, and just some of the kind of what Marith goes through. That I felt that is Marith is me. I lived all of that.
Wow.
And then so Woman of the Sword was then written as a kind of, it's about a woman with children who is a soldier in a kind of huge fantasy army. So it stands completely on its own, but it works best, I think, if you read it after the trilogy, because it is a kind of, it's a woman's not sort of trying to imagine the life of normal people like us, and particularly women with children, caught up in the world that's happening in the House of particularly in the House of Sacrifice, but in Empires of Dust. So it works probably best. And then actually my new book, A Sword of Bronze and Ashes,
Yes,
is a totally new thing. It's set in a whole new world. The series is called The Remaking of This World Ruined. It is me putting myself back together again. It's not as personal. The characters in it aren't me in the same way. They're Kanda, the main character, is me as I'd like to be. She's this kind of strong woman I really admire, and the kind of mother and the kind of woman I'd like to be and aspire to be, rather than the person I am. She's definitely she's the angel on my shoulder, I guess, rather than the devil on my shoulder.
sure.
So that's a different world. It's a different style. It's warmer. It's still quite violent. It's still quite dark in places, but it's more hopeful. It's definitely it's got Arthurian kind of sense to it, and it's definitely got a sense of good against evil. So it depends what you're looking for. I mean, I'd say start at the beginning, start with The Court of Broken Knives and just work through the trilogy, and then A Woman with a Sword. And then there are I can't resist having little tiny references to stuff in A Sword of Bronze and Ashes.
Easter eggs.
Little Easter eggs, and yeah, little kind of, potentially it's the same world, but aeons apart, or potentially it's the same world, but
it sounds like publication order, because not only does it
publication order, I think, is probably
just because of this experience that I'm having with you now, it tells a story on its own through who you are as an author, and I think that's very important with you, specifically. So that's awesome. I love that.
Well, I say my prose has got so much better. So this is technically my best book. The prose here is just, I suppose, possibly because it has got it's much brighter in places. I've read there's little bits of whimsy in it. But I'm getting, my prose is getting better and better. So I'm slightly terrified if John Morrow is listening to this. I'm slightly terrified because he read A Woman with a Sword, then he read A Sword of Bronze and Ashes, and he's now going back and reading Empires of Dust. So I'm like, oh god, Court of Broken Knives is going to seem so crude.
So he was the one specifically that told me how wonderful A Woman of the Sword, and how it's about mothering and being a mother and having in this fantastic world. And I witness strong mothering every single day, and how much of a weakling I am. So when he told me that, I was instantly interested.
Oh, so A Woman of the Sword is A Sword of Bronze and Ashes is like that as well, but less, because the woman she's a mother who is a sort of, I suppose, a better mother, a more positive mother. So yeah, her sense of being a mother is actually much less intense, because she's a rather more laid back, relaxed mother, and her children are sort of happier, managing more happily. So yeah, but yeah, the last two, my last two books are very much about mothers and children, they were both written during or after lockdown. So I was locked in the house with two children. I was doing the classic, trying to homeschool the children, locked in the house. Being a mother was a thing that, being a parent was a thing that was, the only thing in my life for quite a while. So it was something I was definitely reflecting on quite a lot.
Sure. No, that's great. I think a lot of people can relate with that.
Yeah.
Tori says, I love that it's such a journey of self. I relate to that so much, and I love that Anna really leaned into her work. I love that too. Yeah, I think that's unique. I think naturally that every author has somewhat of themselves in their book, but really not to the extent of what I've heard about your story.
I don't know. Maybe it's from growing up being surrounded by poetry, because poetry is kind of, it's not even about, poetry isn't of course about telling a story. It's not about character or story. No one ever talks about the plot of a poem, but certainly the kind of poetry that the people I grew up with, I mean, obviously we're excluding sort of epic poetry. The Iliad is obviously telling a story, but the kind of poetry I grew up with is poetry where you're trying to create beauty and convey intellectual truth and convey emotion and feeling. And it's not even necessarily about writing a coherent sentence or writing things that make sense. I mean, T.S. Eliot, particularly his early poetry, The Wasteland, Prufrock, has always been held up to me as, this is the absolute high point of poetry. This is the high point of the English language. And also Blake's poetry, things like Songs of Innocence and Experience. And those are poems that are about emotion and about human experience and about the self and about how you relate to others and about trying to understand the world and about the beauty of words. They're not telling a story. So for me, yes, the story is obviously important because I'm writing a novel, and it has to drive, there has to be a driving narrative.
Yeah.
But that isn't what's important. Most of my books have all they've actually got very simple plots. If you look at
you can still hear me. Sorry, my phone died. I will replug that. You can still hear me though. This has happened before. I'm very sorry about that.
So yeah, my books have got very, very, in fact, got very simple plots. They're not. I really quite in awe of people who write those kind of very complicated crime novels or those kind of very complicated thrillers where it's all about reveals and complicated things, the story kind of twisting back in itself. But I could not, and have no interest in writing that kind of story. What I'm interested in is a plot. To me, is just this very basic narrative framework that you hang characters and interaction and and places and experiences and emotional responses to each other, and simply the beauty of the language. I will write in a battle because I want to describe the experience, trying to imagine the experience of of being in a battle. There's different experiences. I write a dragon because I want to try and find words to possibly set down the way I feel about imagining dragons, or the way I feel about reading. That line in The Farthest Shore, Le Guin's the third book in the Earthsea trilogy, and where Aaron is sitting on his own and he looks up and he sees the dragons and he says, no matter what comes after, I've seen dragons dancing on the west wind.
Ooh.
And that, how I feel every time I read that line or think of that line, you know, I'm trying to find a way of putting that feeling into words, or that kind of, again, that, you know, that amazing, the famous lines in Blade Runner about I've seen things you people wouldn't believe, you know, every time I hear that, like trying to put into words how I feel listening to that speech, and trying to kind of the things I, you know, you see it with him and trying to put all of that into words. That's why I write. So it is a very intensely personal experience for me. It's about kind of trying to find language to actually just explain.
I can tell.
Myself, how I feel.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense, because what I'm hearing is it's just over and over this deeply personal thing. Sorry that you can't see me. You will be here in just a second. Sorry about this, guys. It happens. Doing a live thing, you find yourself with a plethora of issues. This being one.
See, I have these. Do have tech gremlins. I do this to a lot of people. I've done so many.
This is the third time this has happened to me, and it's simply me just forgetting, because like when you use it as a webcam, it drains the battery. Like this was 100% full before I started, but you know, my face will be back here in just a second.
I'm definitely one of those people where things go wrong. I'm one of those, you know, I don't know if anyone here works in IT, or if, you know, that kind of the person you go up, you're like, ooh, I've never seen this before. I don't know what's happened here. And that's always me. The number of times I feel like, oh, it really shouldn't be doing that. I don't know why it's doing that. I've never seen a computer do that before. That's always me.
Yeah, I think the first time it happened, I had like a mini stroke, a panic attack. Now it's just like one of those things you just deal with real quick, and then go back and do your thing. But I wanted to get to a couple of chat things over here, because we got some really amazing comments. E.L. Montague says simple doesn't mean less. Totally agree.
Yes.
Daryl from Nether Edge, DB Rook, one of my buddies, says this interview has already been so good for my soul. Those are the best, because it's the personal stories that really get me, and this has not been anything less than that, which is just amazing. And Tori says, I'm just soaking this in. I also started with poetry and love the way you're talking about approaching storytelling.
That's wonderful. Yeah,
and Soul Free Wolf says, so many things I need to consider as I learn more how to write, and I can totally relate with him. That's the reason that I started a booktube channel, if you will. It was just to learn. I'm here to learn, and from those who are doing it, it's something I want to do. And I want to do it. I want to do it right. I want to hopefully make a career out of it, and I want my kids to look up to it and be inspired by the written word. It's something that, like I said, later in life, like I was 29 when I really got back into reading. In fact, I never really got into reading until I was 29. So it's never too late either.
Yeah, no, it's never too late to read or write. I mean, yeah, you meet all those kind of people who've been writing. You know, the people who say, like, oh, I've always written. It's like, I mean, technically I've always written. There was just this massive gap. Kind of, yeah, I mean, I'm not kind of, you know, I came to writing quite late. You know, I was in my 30s when I wrote Empires of Dark, Court of Broken Knives, which is the first piece of fiction I wrote as an adult. You know, it's never too late. And actually, I remember this really sad thing someone at work, I heard them saying about how they were saying how they'd love to be an author, but they didn't have the time, and they were looking forward to, because they, you know, they were thinking maybe in retirement. And I'm like, oh God, that's so, you know, that's so sad. But because people have this idea, again, that kind of things like writing retreats, or, you know, you need to have done those Clarion West courses, or you need to have done you need to have writing retreats, or, you know, that image people have of the author as that kind of, you know, they're sitting locked away. And I've just talked about being locked away in my bedroom, but, you know, they're sitting locked away in a study, and it's that classic, you know, the man sitting locked in his study, and if he's got a wife, if we've got such inconveniences as a wife and children, they're kind of, you know, his wife's kind of keeping the children away from him and out of sight, and he's got this sort of hours and hours and days and weeks of silence where he's just there communing with the muse, writing. And you do
Right.
get people posting on Twitter about, oh, I wrote 30,000 words today, wrote 30,000 words yesterday, written half a novel in a month. And yeah, some people do live like that, but most of us don't. And, I certainly don't. I have children. I still work part-time, 3 days a week to pay the mortgage.
Wow.
My life is complete chaos.
So what you're saying is there's never, to answer you real quick, John, my phone died. I'll be back momentarily. Yeah. So you're touching on something that I found to be very important for me personally. I was like, okay, so when I have the time and this and that, you have to make the time. And I'm saying this as somebody who still really, really, really struggles with that. I have kids, and then I'm also doing. I really find what I'm doing here with you one of my favorite things ever. Just talking to people. And do you ever truly have the time, or do you have to make that?
Now I have 2 days a week. Now my children are at school. I have 2 days a week that I write, but that isn't much. 2 out of 7 days a week, and occasionally I get 1 day at the weekend if the children are doing stuff and things. But yeah, no, it's not like I have acres of time. And even the 2 days a week I have, there's that endless, like, oh, every day we seem to be constantly running. They're constantly going out of their school uniform. They constantly need special things. They constantly got days off. They're constantly ill. It's not. I don't have much time, and when they were younger, it was just ridiculous. But you have to fit it. Yeah, you just have to fit it in around it. Or, there are periods when I just say, actually, what's more important right now is just flopping out with my children. That's actually the most important thing. Or I'm spending time with, I spend a lot of time with my parents because I'm old. Yeah, my parents are getting older now. I kind of. No,
wonderful message.
Yeah, no, no matter how much I might regret the fact that I'm not getting the time to write, and maybe I could have written a whole book in the time I've spent with my dad, I would regret more not spending, in 10 years, 20 years time, I'm not going to have the opportunity to spend that time with my dad or with my children, because they'll probably moved out by then, hopefully. So
is having small children like one of the hardest things ever when you found out, like toddler age? Like we have 3 toddlers and a newborn, and it's difficult. It's difficult.
I don't know how you could write a word with 3 toddlers.
It's difficult.
Yeah, and those are precious years. I missed, actually, because I was writing the books when the children were very small. I did miss stuff. There is stuff, and it was that kind of. I missed birthdays and things because I was away doing this amazing. I've just had a book published, and I'm going to go to a convention, and it's amazing, and people are lauding me, and it's so amazing. But it did mean I missed my son's 2nd birthday, which I now kind of feel deeply guilty about. And would I go back? And I don't know. Maybe I would actually go back and go to his birthday party instead of being fancying around being a lauded author somewhere. Because
you're a human.
Yeah, I'm human. Yeah, but yeah, you just have to have a bit of the time. And I don't write every day. I know Mike Fletcher doesn't write every day either. And, lots
he's
of
awesome,
some authors
awesome
do
author,
write.
isn't he?
Yes, he's awesome. He's a wonderful guy. Some authors write every day. Neither Mike or I do. I think Mike's an amazing writer. He obviously doesn't suffer from not writing every day.
Yeah.
He does a lot of the primary care for his child. And yeah, he's kind of, and yeah, no, that obviously is something that's incredibly important to him. And he also just spends a lot of time.
Yeah, he talks about his daughter in such a high. She's like an artist, and she's doing cool things too. So that's super. I'm glad you mentioned a lot of the people who I look up to as well.
Yeah, no, I love Mike. He's just a wonderful guy. But yeah, no, he doesn't write every day. He kind of, you don't need to write every day. You do need to try and keep writing. If you write like once a month, you are never going to be, it's never going to go anywhere. If you think like, oh, I've got 1 hour a month, apart from anything else, it's going to take you the rest of your life to finish that. But you don't need to write every day. What I would say to people is try and stretch yourself. If you don't have time to write, do things like, if you're reading a book, if you manage to, or watching television, to try and start reading and watching more critically. Why is this scene, what is this scene doing to me? Why is this scene affecting me? Why have they shot it in this weird way? Why are they doing this weird lighting effect? Or why am I hearing, why have we cut so I can't see the woman's face when she makes this big speech? Or all that, or why is this passage in this book so good, or why in fact is this passage in this book a bit rubbish and I appear to have, I read it last night and I'm reading it again tonight because I can't remember it. That kind of and also when you're observing things. So, I mean, all the stuff I'm writing my books comes from me observing stuff. And
very evident.
Yeah, I'll be walking down the streets with my children, just walking them to school, and I'll see the light effects. And I'll just be trying to, like, how would I put that into words? Just, try and soak that into my brain. That is an amazing sky for a particular scene, or just that effect of the light, or the feeling when it started to rain. That's something I want to try and capture. So I want to try and remember how I felt, and I want to try and get the words down now. So it's like, it's that kind of staying in writer modes and trying to have the world around you.
David List, another one of my good buddies, coming with the questions. Of course he did. I knew he would. He Violence and Vigilance, that's what he wrote. So I'm so happy to talk about this next topic because I can tell it was dear to you. The British Fantasy Society for Save the Children, your auction.
Yes.
Tell us about that and how it ended up.
Oh, that's taken up a lot of my time recently. That was this really mad thing I did. It was obviously came out of watching the events in Israel and Gaza and just being broken by them. I mean, Stas, the guy who drew the picture that's my backdrop, he lives in Israel. His family are all in Israel. I kind of, I was messaging him like, God, Stas, kind of.
What can you say?
Yeah, what do I say? I really hope none of your family and friends are dead. It's just kind of, and then I've also got, I had a friend for many years who was, her family were in Jordan because they'd had to flee Gaza.
Yeah.
They were very kind of, I know several people who are Palestinian, it's just.
There's some hard times being had over there.
Yeah, there's just horrifying. And then, of course, there's still, there's all the other stuff going on in the world. There was an earthquake in Afghanistan that same week that wasn't even really reported because.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, because because obviously what happened in Israel and Gaza was so huge. And Afghanistan is, it's just such a fucked country. And then they're going to have an earthquake, and I really felt I wanted to do something. And I was going to a convention that weekend. So I sort of said, look, could we organise some fundraising at the convention somehow? And people were like, well, if we had 6 months notice, but you cannot arrange a fundraiser at a convention at 3 days notice. It's just, impossible.
Yeah.
And obviously completely. So then I was looking online for kind of, is there a way I could donate a book to a book auction? And I couldn't, to some kind of fundraising auction. And I couldn't find one. So I suddenly just thought, damn it, I'm going to do it myself. And I just started messaging friends saying, would you donate a book, a signed book or a tucker or something to raise money for Save the Children? And I decided on Save the Children because they are absolutely politically neutral. They are operating in Israel and in Gaza. Their purpose is to provide emergency funding for children who are suffering the consequences of adults' action. I mean, I wanted to be very careful to make sure there was no suggestion of anti-Semitism or Islamophobia or picking a side. Because as I said, I've got got many very dear friends who are East European Jewish. They don't want to know what members of their family went through.
Yeah, no. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's incredibly. I've also got friends, as I said, who are Palestinian. It was incredibly important to me. We had something completely politically neutral, which was concerned with helping the children who are
children.
I mean, they're just on both sides. They have no part in this. They have no ability to stop this. So I was messaging friends, fellow authors, saying would they want to do it, and it was almost the first person I messaged was Anna Stevens, who comes into my, oddly enough, whenever I start thinking about other fantasy authors, Anna Stevens, weirdly enough, comes to mind because she's my doppelganger. People get us confused all the time. But I could, as I was sending this message, I could feel myself thinking, this is a really bad idea. This is going to take up my life. This is going to be several weeks of my life that are going to be dedicated solely to this. And I pressed send. And 2 minutes later, Anna pinged back, yes, just tell me what you need.
Nice.
Okay, this is happening. And I mean, and then it was done through the British Fantasy Society, which I'm a member of, which several of my good friends are on the committee for, because I wanted to give it that. It seemed a bit better than Anna Smith Spark, a random author, is running an auction, to have it as something kind of, run through run sort of through the British Fantasy Society as something official. They were really keen to get on board. And I was just being deluged with authors coming in, people were approaching me saying, can I be part of it as well? I ended up having to close, and actually ended up having to tell people of the statue and Adrian Tchaikovsky that I couldn't take any more items because I was full and the auction was up and running.
These items too were so incredible. Like,
some of the things I got were amazing.
Characters in books.
Yeah. Steve Erickson offered a tucker. I was dancing around the room when he sent me that.
I remember you sent me that message. You're like, yeah, I got a hold of Steve Erickson. I was dancing around the room. I said that in my head, I was just so happy that you got that experience. That's so cool.
It was amazing. And the people were so generous, the amount of people were bidding, and I had a donate button and people were donating. And I wanted to get it up and running quickly. If I was still organising it now and eventually rolling it out, I'm sure it could have been a lot, massive, and I could probably have raised more money. But we don't need the money in 6 months' time. The children in Israel and Gaza and Afghanistan and now Nepal needed the money yesterday. So I just did it really quickly, got the website up and running, I used just a auction provider website, got the whole thing up and running in about 4 days, had it open for a week, and I raised £3,600.
That's great.
I think that's about the same in dollars now, isn't it? Since we crashed our currency,
it's like a little. It's a little less. It's probably like $5,000, which is a nice chunk.
Yes, it was
in like a week.
Yeah, in a week. Yes, I mean, people were just bidding. The prices that things went for was amazing, but then people were offering the most amazing thing. So Ryan Cowhill offered his this special broken binding edition of his first book of
Blood and Fire.
Of Blood and Fire, yes, thank you. Which is again one of those titles you're like, oh
yeah, yes.
And that book was just absurdly beautiful.
It's crazy.
Metalled and illustrated, and
it's one of those that's like, I wish, like, I'm still not on the subscribed list, because I'm waiting, because there's so many people that are currently subscribed to the broken binding, but one day I will be on that list.
Yes. But and he donated. That's one of the last copies that he had of that. And Mike Shackle donated the broken binding, the whole of his trilogy.
I saw that.
Yeah, and then me and Justin Lee Anderson donated annotated books, and this is now taking up our entire lives, because we both said that we did go through our books. He's only got the one, but then his is very long, and we're going through our books, underlining, explaining all the little stuff, giving all the kind of stuff I've just
like
been talking
author's
about.
Thoughts, like your thoughts as you're writing this.
Yes, and all the kind of, not a lot of people know this, but this minor character is actually my dog from when I was 6, or or kind of, not a lot of people know this, but this is a joke. This really nasty character is actually my old maths teacher, or that, that kind of, and all the stuff I've just been talking about as well. The kind of, this is me kind of quoting a poem that means a lot to me, or this is me, this description of the sunset was an actual sunset that I remember. And, this particular landscape is this particular place that I love. And I'm going through the book. I've got all these photos. So this is the one I'm doing. So it's just full of annotations.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And there's there's like newspaper clippings and photos.
That's
and
deep.
All this. Yeah, and some printouts of poems and all this stuff. And it's taking me forever, because it's like every paragraph I'm like, oh, and there's this about this paragraph. But
so it's 470 pages, and you're going through.
I've said I'd do all 5 books, so it's going to take me the rest of my life.
Oh wow, yeah,
that's
a step.
It raised a lot of money. It went for a lot of money. I kind of
No, I totally look up to it. I just know with the undertaking that is, and good for you. I think that's amazing.
It's nice having someone knowing all that stuff. All that stuff that no one will ever know. Like, seriously, that kind of this. This very minor character is they are based on, an old maths teacher. No one's going to know that, and it's quite nice, the idea that someone will know that, or all that kind of those little in jokes we make, or those really random things like this. There's one bit where I have sort of this that all authors will admit to if you get them drunk enough or candid enough about this character's name is an anagram of the coffee shop I was sitting in, because I couldn't think of a name at all, and I was staring and staring and staring, and then I thought, Costa, I'll just anagram that. Or yes, that kind of desperate. So actually Mark Turner had this, confessed to me that several of his characters in one book, he was his place names, he was absolutely desperate for some names and his brain was just gone. He was having a complete writer's block. And he grabbed an atlas. So there's a whole little bit, there's a chapter where various minor characters are named after small towns in France, because he grabbed an atlas, threw it open.
Anything that will work, right? Anything will work.
And that bit, like, you don't know this, but no one knows this, but this character is actually named after an entry in a Bowden catalogue, because I was just desperate and I grabbed it and opened it, and there was a skirt called the Janine. So that's why this character is called Janine.
That's amazing.
That didn't quite happen, but that it's nice that someone will know all this stuff. It's nice that all
it
of
is,
this,
and it's going to enhance their experience.
Yes, and that,
So, what are you currently reading? Anything?
Currently reading anything? Actually, I'm reading quite a lot of non-fiction at the moment. I'm reading a really interesting book about which was published in the 1980s, but it's about moment. It's about pagans and Christians in the period, the 100 years just before Constantine converts Christianity and then declares the Roman Empire Christian. So it's talking about people's attitudes to belief and religion, and how people go from being the great persecutions and Christians being burnt to Europe is Christian in how this happens so quickly, and it's a very interesting book. But
that sounds really interesting.
It is really interesting, and it's a lot of it is trying to find ways of trying to get at, and actually we have more than you'd think, just personal experiences of Christian experiences and also pagan experiences in that period. So just not normal, in inverted commas, I mean, because they're these literate, educated people, so they're not like the majority of the people in the Roman Empire, but how they experienced religion and how they might have experienced a religious feeling, or the feeling they'd get from being in a temple, or the experience of making a prayer offering for someone's health and then that person surviving or that person dying, and those kind of the personal experiences of religion and therefore of day-to-day life and how you understand life and death.
What's it called?
It's called, I think it's just called Pagans and Christians.
Okay.
It's by a man called Robin Lane Fox.
Robin Lane Fox.
He also wrote a very, very good book. He wrote a big biography of Alexander the Great. And in fact, he was actually the historical consultant on the film Alexander, the really terrible one with Colin Farrell. He said he didn't want to be that, because at that point he was a big eminent professor of Greek in Cambridge or Oxford. He didn't want to be paid, but he wanted to lead the charge at Gaugamela. So that was his fee was, when those shot in the Colin Farrell film of Alexander, when you see them at Gaugamela charging down to annihilate the Persian ranks, this aging British historian, that was his thing, to actually be able to say to people he led the charge at Gaugamela.
It's like, I don't want the money, I just want to hang out and I want to be at the front of this really cool scene. I like that. That's really unique.
Yes, it's I mean, it's the kind of, I would do that totally. But so it's a kind of, this is an academic book, but it's just absolutely amazing that you can get quite a lot of stuff about people's experience of people who sort of talk about, feeling that they had that they'd had an experience meeting the god Apollo, say, and they write, and you can get people's personal experiences, things like that. It's a fascinating book.
Yeah.
But what am I reading otherwise? I've just been reading Shona Lawless's second book. The Words of Kings and Prophets, which is wonderful. I mean, I love Irish history, mythology. I
have to dip into that series myself.
Yeah, they're really wonderful books. They're just beautiful.
So what's next for you? I'm excited to hear this.
What's next for me? So at the moment I'm writing book 2 of the sequel to Sword of Bronze and Ashes, book 2 in the remaking of This World Ruined series. And then the 2 really exciting, both fairly random things I've got. On the 20th of November, Tor.com are doing the cover reveal for a novella which I have co-authored with Michael R. Fletcher, which has been published by Grimdark magazine.
I've seen that today.
Yes, which me and Mike just trying to push each other to see just how far can too far go. And
I'm excited.
Far, I think is the answer.
That's going to be fun. I've seen it on Goodreads today. I've seen it wasn't out yet. So I was actually hoping that you would touch on that. So what's the name of the novella?
It's called In the Shadow of Their Dying.
In the Shadow of Their Dying. Ooh.
Yes.
And by the way, remaking of This World Ruined is just brilliant. I love that.
I do not do short titles. I look at people like John Gwynne with his Ruin, Wrath.
Yeah,
like, why can't I do that? Why do I do ridiculously long
I think he got a step ahead, because those words, I don't know if there's, I'm sure there's some equally as emotional words, but there aren't many as captivating as those that he used for the Banished Lands. I think I haven't read that series yet. Now I'm on Hunger of the Gods. The Shadow of the Gods is amazing. Hunger, that's my thing. I love Norse mythology and all that fun stuff, just because that's my ancestry, and I've been really kind of digging that lately. But so you've got book 2 and remaking of The World Ruined, and then your novella. Oh my goodness. Yes. You've got some fun and exciting things.
So much fun. It was completely chaotic. We drove Adrian Collins at Grimdark magazine insane, because we were kind of writing it tag team. So one of us, I think, Fletcher wrote the first chapter, and then he just sent it to me, and I wrote the second chapter from a different point of view. And then I sent it back to him, and he wrote the third chapter from a different point of view, and we kind of just did it between them. So he
Matt's fantasy. He's always got those comments.
Something of something. Yes,
he's got great comments. He pops in. I appreciate you popping in, brother.
You can't get better than the something of something, really. And I mean, Empires of Dust. I was like, serious title. It's got to have the word empire in it. I mean, I've just got to shoebar the word empire somewhere into something I've written. So it's like, I mean, the House of Sacrifice. It's like,
what a romantic word, like we talked about at the beginning.
You cannot beat a book with the word any book which has got the House of something or the Empire of something. I'm in there. Yeah.
Heck yeah. Great comment, Matt.
But me and our novella, it's so because of the way we were writing it spontaneously. We didn't do any plotting or world building beforehand, which is fine. I mean, we're both right like that, and it's fine when you're doing it on your own, because you can go back and change things, and you'll start like, I see why this person is doing this. And also, of course, you have the whole manuscript there as you're writing, so you can scroll back and forth. But we kind of it was quite chaotic doing it when there's 2 of you, because you've got, well, we'd be writing stuff, and one of us would know in our head, oh yes, in 5 chapters this will happen, and this is why this is here, and this is being set up. But of course, the other one didn't know that, and we didn't bother having that kind of conversation where we were like, this is important, this bit, remember this bit, or anything.
That's a unique take.
It was basically a game of consequences in book form, in the form of a grimdark book. So it's it did get to the point, at one point Adrian was like, look, did you guys go back and reread the stuff you've already written before you carry on writing it? And we're like, we kind of skim. He's like, do you have any idea what time, when this next chapter opens, do you have any idea what time of day the chapter is opening in? No.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, I think that you're with the majority there. He must be, Adrian's a great dude. I've been chatting with him in
Adrian's
email.
Wonderful. But I think he was getting a bit fed up, because we were like, well, why do we need to know what's happening? Why do we need to remember stuff like what time of day it is? I mean, come on. We're artists. We don't need to worry about things like continuity.
Sure.
Yeah, and Adrian's like, you really do need to worry about things like continuity. And but yeah, no, it was we were just pushing each other and really pushing each other and just
I
being
think
like, okay.
that's an amazing friendship to have. Somebody who can push you and be critical and kind.
It
In the
wasn't
kindest
even
ways.
critical. It was just like, okay, I see you this. I see you've done something that you think is like the most grimdark thing ever. I raise you this other thing that I think is even more grimdark.
I love it. I love it. I'm excited to read that.
It was just so, yeah, no, it was the most chaotic, absurdly just kind of, yeah, I'm just going to push this. Then they might be like, yeah, you've pushed it. Well, I'm going to push it. I'm like, yeah,
so
you haven't seen anything.
Fun though? Fun?
There's so much fun. Yeah, just crazy. It's not perhaps my most literary piece of work, but it is, my God, it was fun to write. And it was just, yeah, it was just purely just.
Now, when does that come out?
That comes out, I'm not sure when it's coming out, actually. The cover reveal is soon.
Okay.
Tor.com are doing a cover reveal at the end of the month. And I'm not actually quite sure when it's coming out. Early next year.
I'll look out for that.
I guess.
I'll look out.
And the other thing I'm doing next, which I'm frantically, I need to get everything finished in the novel I'm writing, because next year I'm going to be writing a Judge Death novel. I don't know if people know 2000 AD. It was, I don't know how big it ever got in America. Yeah. But it was a huge part of my childhood in Britain. I'm never quite sure how it translated to America. It was very, very British. But yeah, Judge Dredd. And there's a wonderful series with a character called Judge Anderson, who is a kind of, she was originally modelled on Debbie Harry. She's quite a sort of young, tough female judge, so kind of policeman. She's also psychic, but she's kind of tough, but also quite nice. She's quite relatable, strong. She's a relatable, strong, independent woman. You know, she's like quite a cool boss sort of woman.
Yeah.
And then she has this conflict with Judge Death, who is this sort of horrifying, monstrous being who takes the notion of crime and punishment to the point of that his catchphrase is the sort of, the crime is life, the punishment is death, as in to be alive is to injure others or to do things which might transgress a rule somewhere. You know, there's always that possibility from a toddler running on a sign where it's running on a bit of grass, ignoring the sign saying "Do not run on the grass," to, you know, everything. The fact that, you know, you could be ordering a missile strike on a city is, to be alive is to always be about possibly going to commit crime. So you deal with this by killing everybody.
Oh yeah,
because a sterile world is a crime-free world. So Judge Dredd enjoys killing, but also it is this kind of, you know, a dead universe is a universe without the possibility of crime and suffering. So
that's a unique take. I like that.
Judge Death is just unbelievably cool, and Judge Anderson is just cool because she is she's the kind of woman I would like to be. She's a strong, independent, but also human woman.
Which I think a lot of people
describe about them, which is going to be awesome. It's a childhood dream.
I'm very excited for you.
It's kind of, I mean, it's that I grew up reading 2000 AD, and my name is going to be on a 2000 AD novel. I'm going to have my name.
That probably feels surreal.
Yeah, it does. It's kind of, it does. It's like a kind of, it is that kind of childhood. Yeah, it's that sort of, it is a childhood.
It's like I have this nostalgia from my childhood, and now I get to be a part of it.
Yes,
wow, that's not many of us get to say that.
Yes, it's
so
really special.
Cool.
Yeah, no, it's really, really special. I wouldn't write for any old, just, you know, I wouldn't, you don't normally write that kind of franchise novel, and it's slightly scary, the idea of writing in someone else's world, because of, as you may have gathered, it's going to be quite different from the way I write my own books, because it's not going to be about my own personal experience, and it's not going to be, and I have to give them something like a plot like that line and keep to the characters and things. Obviously it's going to be really different, but yeah, I'm being paid to live a childhood dream.
That sounds so cool.
Really cool. Yeah,
I'm very happy for you, and I'm excited to get to that.
That won't be coming out for ages. That I'm not even. Yeah, I'm going to write that.
It gives me something to look forward to, though. There's always those little bits that I like to hear. It's like, I don't care when it comes out. I get to look forward to it, which is most of the fun. So I always like to ask this question. Who is somebody you'd like to see me interview in the future?
Oh God. Have you interviewed Mike Fletcher?
I have.
Yes. Yes. Who would you? Anna Stevens. Is Anna Stevens big in America?
Ooh,
Do you know Anna Stevens? I don't know
I'm
how.
not familiar. No,
So
I will be.
she wrote. People always get the two of us confused, which is really embarrassing. The number of times one or other of us gets a lengthy email saying, "Oh, I love your books. I think they're amazing," and then when you get to the end, you're like, "Oh,
Oh, she's
I don't
not talking
actually
about
mean
me.
me."
What's one of the
She
novels?
wrote Godblind. Her first trilogy was the Godblind trilogies. That's Godblind, Dark Soul, Bloodchild, and
I
then
feel like I've seen those covers.
her new books are the Stone Knife, the Jaguar Path, and I cannot remember what the forthcoming one is. And
I'll check it out.
they're sort of Mesoamerican sort of set, and they're really interesting because the main character is one of the main characters is a woman who is completely deaf, but she lives in a world in which being deaf gives you huge advantages.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, so Anna had some interesting challenges in writing out a character because obviously, sort of, she was having to sort of work out slightly different ways of writing about someone's communicating with people, but at the same time, it's a totally different experience of deafness in the real world because she's sort of special and incredibly
Yeah,
helpful.
because
So
you
yeah,
think of being deaf, it's a challenge, and so
yeah,
you change it up to where you're actually better off in a world.
yes,
That's
it's a
really cool take
challenge,
on it.
but also it's a challenge every day, but also a huge advantage. So yeah, it's kind of
Well,
so yes, so get her
gosh,
on.
I'm definitely going to get a hold of her, check her books out. I love those kind of answers where I get to discover somebody new. And I'm going to talk with Adrian in January, which I think will be fun because
Yes,
I hope to one day write for a Grimdark magazine. I think they've got a great thing going on,
they're
and
amazing. They're
he
just
says just
brilliant.
the most wonderful things about you, of course.
Oh, no, they're amazing. I mean, I owe Grimdark magazine and Adrian so much,
It's a
and
good relationship to have.
and they're such a great magazine. Again, it's that, and then they've been the statements they've made about AI and things and how it just sickens Adrian. He's absolutely refusing to have anything to do with AI, and again, it's he's taken a really important stand and
That's
saying,
good.
unlike most of the big publishers, he's saying he'll never use AI art, even though he's not really, he's publishing stories, and it would save him a fortune to do AI art. But actually, similarly with me and Judge Dredd, he was saying he remembers sitting at school watching his friend draw Space Marines, and now he can pay a cover artist to draw, not quite draw
Yes.
Space Marines, but just it sickens him, the idea that you wouldn't pay someone to do that stuff that you.
Yeah, I totally respect
Yeah,
that take on it too.
no, he's a great guy with just again such a positive attitude to the community, and just
I certainly hope that this isn't our last time speaking. I have to go pick the kids up from babysitters, but I'll tell you that I've had exceeded my expectations. I got such a wonderfully personal story from you, and I will absolutely keep in touch with you. And I hope that the next time we talk, we'll have like maybe a couple people, and that'll be fun. We'll talk about one of your books or something. But thank you so much for letting me borrow you for a little bit.
thank
Thanks
you so much for having me.
Of course. It's been a pleasure, an honor. And thanks for everybody that watched live and anybody who will watch in the future. And until next time, guys, you have a wonderful day. And if you're in the UK, have a wonderful night.
Yes, and yes, can I just say, being able to say I was interviewed by the Beard of Darkness feels like a minor life highlight.
Oh, well, thank you so much for saying
just
that.
be able to tell people, the Beard of Darkness. That's just such an awesome name.
My new favorite part of the interview was just that.
Yes. What did you do last night? I had a chat with the Beard of Darkness.
All right.
Awesome. And it is an awesome beard.
Thank you so much for that. It came to me one day and I said, that is the name I'm going to use. Nobody's used it. It's like, how sometimes you come up with a name like on Yahoo or Gmail. It's like you have to add like numbers and stuff out because there's people that used it. Nobody's used that. So I think I nailed it. So thank you so much for the compliment.
Awesome. It's just brilliant. Yeah, the Beard of Darkness. It makes me smile every time I see a message from you.
Thank you. I really appreciate you. And until next time, guys, just like I said, have a wonderful day, and Anna, have a wonderful night, and we'll keep in touch.
Thank you so much for having me. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.